Welcome everyone to today's webinar. I'm Megan Knowles with Becker's Dental and DSO Review. We'll begin today's webinar with a presentation and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. We're looking forward to hearing your questions. Additionally, throughout today's webinar, there will be a few poll questions for the audience. The poll questions will pop up automatically on your screen. You can then select your answer from the options and click Submit. Thank you in advance for your participation. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. In about a week following the webinar, we will be sending all registrants a copy of the presentation to the email you used to register. Please be patient as the post-webinar preparation of materials can take some time. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's presenter. Michelle Dowling is Director of Dental Relationships at TSYS. Michelle has over 15 years of experience in the merchant services industry. For the past 4 years, she's focused on the healthcare industry in a role to optimize sales, operations, and overall payment strategy for providers and practices. She oversees the relationship management teams that manage key dental and veterinary integrated and association partners. Michelle currently resides in Charlotte, North Carolina with her husband and 2 children. At this time, I'm pleased to turn over the floor to Michelle to begin today's presentation.
Thank you, Megan. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Today, we will be discussing a trend influencing our entire society and its effect on the dental practice and patient payments. This trend is known as digitalization. The effects of our digitalized world reach into every corner of our lives. We see it in consumer demand for connectivity and the increases in technology. It's faster than ever today to transfer information, and it's even available to us right now on our wrists. In today's webinar, we'll discuss the dramatic developments in digital technology, its implications on individuals, businesses, government, and our society as a whole. As consumers, our desire for technology can be narrowed down to meet needs for connectivity, communication, and convenience.
Thanks, Michelle. So at this time, we're going to start with our first polling question, and that is, does your practice have an online presence today, such as a website or online portal? Please click yes or no. Okay, so it looks like, just waiting for the last few responses to come in. And 86% of our respondents said yes, and 14% said no. So most people do. Great.
Awesome. And we'll get into a little bit more on online payments and why they're important in a few slides. But what we'd like to really talk about in this stage is how we look at digitalization, because we know that the only constant in life is change. Healthcare and dental care is no exception. And in line with our broader healthcare industry, dental care is changing to better align with consumers' current needs. Today's consumers are more engaged and active in their health. We track tons of data and have access to records at our fingertips. During this webinar, we're going to answer these 3 key questions. What is digitalization? Why is it important to your patients and your dental practice? And finally, what can you do with this information to increase profitability and patient satisfaction? Digitalization provides 2 main things. It's digital connectivity for everyone to everything, anywhere, and at any time. And it provides the tools for analyzing and using data in many different ways. The effect on our everyday lives is staggering, and we're attached to our devices now more than ever and consume information faster than ever. It impacts our everyday lives in these different manners. It's people and the relationship with the internet. The internet is a mental, social, and physical extension of ourselves. It's the ability to interface with technology, data, anywhere and every time. It's called the Internet of Things, which is the digital linking of inanimate objects or the digitalization of the physical world. It's accessibility of intelligence and big data in the ability to analyze and use it according to making decisions, such as electronic healthcare records is a good example of this. It's allowance in our economy to allow for the direct exchange of goods, services, and money between parties outside of traditional establishments. And it is the digitalization of matter. We see it in 3D printing and creating physical materials right on the spot. Digitalization is the adoption of new technology in order to replace older, outdated technology. In this section of the webinar, we'll discuss how to capitalize on this trend at the dental practice.
Thank you for those points, Michelle. So we have our second poll question now for you. And this question is, does your practice or organization utilize online payment capabilities, such as a patient portal or e-statements, to capture patient payments? And then you should have your yes or no. Okay, so the results are in, and it looks like just over half said no, 59%, and the remaining said yes, 41%.
Awesome. The reason why this is an important question is because this is a great example of digitalization. And 5 or 6 years ago, we were talking about how to make our statements easier to read, and now we're talking about opening up online capabilities to take payments. So from there, we'll go on to healthcare today is sometimes even called the age of digital healthcare. And there are veteran clinicians and students that easily can see how much this has changed over the years. But compared to other industries, the dental industry still seems to be a little behind in adopting or integrating new technologies on a widespread basis. So we're going to discuss next how it will affect your patient's personal experience and communication with the practice. So as you know, gone are the days of consulting your yellow pages to get a phone number. And you use the phone you dial into on the wall. So now it's become imperative that your practice has a presence online in order for new and even existing patients to find out information about you. So creating a detailed and informative and even basic website to give new patients the knowledge they need about the office and a call to action so they can schedule an appointment is really imperative. A prospective patient's decision process basically parallels any typical buyer's decision cycle. First, there's a need or desire, then there's research. I'm sure everyone does this research today online to find a review, and then they make a decision. And often this decision either has them calling your office or visiting your website if they want to go forward and make an appointment. So if your website is effective, they make the call and it converts into a new patient. We're going to discuss how to put this into action and build on what you have in place today.
Great, thank you. So we've got another question considering that online presence that Michelle's been talking about. So this question for you is, does your website motivate your patients to make an appointment? Please answer yes or no. All right, so we had most of our respondents at 54% said no, and 46% said yes.
Great, because I have some information for you that might help you convert your website into gaining new patients. And it really does begin with the patient themselves in mind. And one way to look at your patient mix is to look at what generation they belong to. And maybe some of the ways that we say our website is, promoting us to get new clients or isn't, really does start with the question of what is the generation of your patients. Certain generations share characteristics because they've overall experienced similar trends at approximately the same life stage and through similar channels. They are people who develop and share related values, beliefs, and expectations. So it's important to remember everyone is an individual, but if you can start to look at the generations in your practice, you can also often predict and analyze how to reach, inform, or persuade them. It may be hard to believe, but did you know that by the year 2020, less than 2 years away, an entire generation will have grown up in a mostly digital world? It's pretty interesting to think of it that way. The key trends that shape a generation are parenting, technology, and economics. We're going to ask the next polling question, which is, what generation are you in?
Great. So the next question, what generation are you a part of? And the options are baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, or post-millennials. Okay, so most of our audience is part of Generation X, 47%, followed by the next is millennials, and we have the least amount in baby boomers and post-millennials. Great.
Awesome. We're going to talk a little bit about each group because they come with very specific characteristics on how they want to be reached and how we can promote talking to them. So first, we're going to talk about the baby boomers. And this is the demographic group born between 1946 and 1964. They're called baby boomers because they were born during the big baby boom that followed the last World War. Baby boomers can be characterized by safe buying behaviors. They're hesitant to borrow, they pay on time, and they often save up for rainy days. And baby boomers have seen the most changes to payment methods and technologies in their lifetime. They are typically cast as opposed to new technologies. However, there was research done by the Pew Charitable Trust in the United States, and they revealed that 33% of them have used mobile payments, which shows that they're actually not opposed. It's just maybe a smaller amount compared to other generations. Indicates that they also prefer cash, but they're comfortable making a digital payment. They're the only check age group that's keeping paper checks in circulation. So those are some interesting statistics. For the 47% of us, myself included, in the Generation X category, these are folks who were born between 1965 and 1983. They're often identified as rebellious and disinfected youths who grew up to have sensible entrepreneurial careers. Gen Xers came of the age of when the credit card boom happened. And as a result, this generation relies on plastic cards the most, and in fact, Experian claims that they have the most credit card debt. Generation X took home the first PC and have generally embraced emerging technologies. And thanks to that entrepreneurial spirit, Gen Xers are prone to taking risks, especially and even when it comes to their money. That same Pew Charitable Trust reports that 80% own smartphones, and they're the group with the second highest adoption of mobile payments after the next group, which are millennials. A millennial is anyone born between 1984 and 2004. And most millennials are in their early stage of their careers. They're starting to commit to mortgages and retirement plans. They're considered the generation that has the biggest influence on current payment trends. They define consumer characteristics such as expectation of efficiency, convenience, personalization. These are the three things they're looking for from the businesses that they support. And millennials value the reward system. They like customized consumer experiences, and they prefer brands that are accessible via social media. They're the generation that doesn't have a favorite form of payment methods. Instead, they choose many different payment methods. Whatever they choose, their use has to fulfill these three fundamental requirements: faster, better, and more intimate. They're characterized as being connected, communicating, content-centric, computerized, and always clicking. So by 2020, this grouping will make up 40% of the population and 10% of the rest of the world. And by then, a millennial will constitute the largest group of consumers worldwide. Having owned a digital device their whole lives, they'll be intimately familiar with them and use almost 6 hours a day. They all have mobile phones, using text messages all the time, and 95% of them have computers, and more than half of them use instant messages to communicate, have Facebook pages, and watch videos on YouTube. I know this is a rather small part of our audience, but Generation Z is also called the post-millennial generation, and they're the demographic cohort that follows them. They have a significant overlap, and the start date for Generation Z is generally placed around 1995, but the end date for the millennial generation isn't until 2004. So because of this, Generation Z shares a few traits with millennials. This generation is the most comfortable with digital and mobile payments. They embrace contactless payments. That's when you can just wave your phone over something and it automatically accepts your payment. They aren't as wary of security concerns surrounding payment apps the way millennials and Gen Xers are, and they will make up 40% of all consumers by 2020. And predictions indicate this group will be the biggest supporter of cryptocurrencies and decentralized banking, things like Bitcoin. So capitalizing on how each generation preference of communication and the way they pay, their propensity to pay, can improve upon your relationship and the practice. Often, these are ways for us to get referrals, and we would like to keep working towards getting paid quickly and reliably. So now that we know these multiple generations that make up your patients, how do the dental offices use this information to create like a digital marketing technique to grow the practice? So as we know, consumers are spending more and more time and they're active on social networks. And the way they search for you in this practice or the provider is evolving. And if a practice wants to stay relevant, they need to embrace these new marketing channels. This is a quote from the CEO of 1-800-DENTIST. So the next part of the webinar will discuss how the community as a whole views and uses digital marketing and communication practices. We'll talk about the activity you can implement immediately to see results. So because we're connected on a 24/7 basis, we have 4.6 billion mobile users globally and 1.7 billion internet users. And of course, among those younger generations, 52% say they feel disconnected from the world, from their world, if they don't have their mobile phones with them. 91% of mobile users keep their phones less than 3 feet away from them, whether waking or sleeping. And by 2020, these numbers are just going to skyrocket further. We're going to reach 6 billion for mobile users, and 4.7 billion primarily will be talking through their mobile devices. So the power of the internet seamlessly connects with our personal and our business activities on our devices. So this affects our entire lives, how we perform work tasks, how we commute, how we shop, how we communicate, and how we access our entertainment. So this data is evidence that your patients really are looking for you to communicate to them via their devices, and it'll be imperative to get that up and running over the next 2 years. So it's a normal question to ask. Well, how does marketing work? How much should we spend on marketing? How do you know if it's working? It can be confusing, and sometimes practices view marketing as an afterthought because there's so many things that are going on at the office that are urgent and at the forefront of your mind. So we suggest beginning at how the patients decide to schedule an appointment, how they contact you, how you reach new patients. How do they hear about your office? It has to be a referral. Is it some type of mailing? Is it something that you can post around your neighborhood? Most consumers, including prospective dental patients, typically need to see something about a business between 3 and 5 times before they're likely to respond. At that point, prospective patients will likely go online to look for information, they'll look for a review, and they'll even look for experience. If they're satisfied with what they read, they'll visit your website, learn if you're real and you exist, learn more about your practice and the services you offer. And when they're ready to make a final decision about whether or not they're going to schedule an appointment, they'll reach out. So the practice can capitalize on these positive effects of digitalization. Patients know to contact an office by phone to get or give information. But sometimes for the patient, the best time that they can contact you is on their lunch hour or when they're home in the evenings. And obviously the office is out. So how are ways that you can avoid spending countless hours returning messages or that tedious game of playing phone tag? An email might be an option, but most people don't converse with their practitioners this way. And you're not going to go bouncing back and forth to try to schedule appointments via email. However, we are living by a 24/7, by 365 society. So we are also expecting quick communication and responses. So the important factor here is to encourage a communication that's convenient for the staff and the patient. So if you can consider opening up new channels, this is website, social media messaging, that will help to create these personal networks. And these go beyond the traditional groups of family, friends, and work colleagues. A lot of people who are connected via social media are extended friends and online acquaintances, or even they could be part of interest groups. So you need to remember that these reaches are bigger than even just close friends and family. 49% of a group from 16 to 24, they are savvy network users. They are using social media all the time. And the average person by year 2020 will live in a network of somewhere between 200 and 300 contacts. So what that means is your practice has the ability to reach many different people that go outside of our close circles. So even within our own families, we see there's a decreased need for physical proximity. And that's because of an increase in digital interaction. Text messaging my kids when it's dinner time is really different than it was a few years ago when they were really young and they were with me all the time. So I bring this example to you to realize that the power of your reach really does extend outside of the small community of close groupings that people have today. And social networks go with us because they're mobile. Here are some ideas to get you started on what to share on social media so that we can actually reach those 200 to 300 contacts that people have. Activities, contests, events of the office, things like patient of the month, patient milestones, achievements, of course with their consent, are ways to talk about activities at the office, and these shares make your communication consistent and get your practice's name and patient experiences in front of others. And in all honesty, it may be most helpful to have someone in charge of managing the practice social media account, and regular posting is a very big key to success in this area. You need to monitor pages and messages to ensure potential networking isn't overlooked. Creating unique contact that represents your practice is important, and encouraging your patients to tag and check in during your visits. Again, it's all about generating activity. And when they do have this activity, their friends see your practice names, and it starts to build familiarity with your brand, with your practice. And remember, we said it takes 3 to 5 to 6 times to see that before it motivates someone to do something many times. If you can invest in marketing material around the office that asks the patients to review the practice, could be simple flyers here and there, and create referral cards to be shared with friends or family or colleagues, and be creative in order to create a culture of communication and referrals. It's free advertising, and I'm sure you found that there's nothing better than a referral. And ensuring your presence online is another way to make sure you're not missing out on opportunities. With regards to social media, there are recommended times and days of the week to share posts, depending upon what site you're using. So if you're going to do this, let's make sure you're posting at peak periods so that you can get the best visibility. So sites like Twitter recommend posting between around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And Facebook suggests between noon and 3, believe it or not, on Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Very specific. Between noon and 1 on the weekends. Instagram seems to get the most hits during lunch hours, Monday through Friday. And posting at peak times is really where you want to try to hit this social media marketing component. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to be online at these times, but why not try to maximize your exposure for the effort that you're putting into it? So let's say this new patient has come to the practice and they've had their appointment, and we're going to talk a little bit about what their experience looks like. Does it take more time to check out than it would at the grocery store? If the answer is yes, or sometimes, let's talk about how digitalization and automation offer solutions that make for a very efficient visit.
Thank you for those insights, Michelle. So at this time, we have our final poll question, and that is, does your practice or organization's website promote the available payment options for patients? Yes or no? We are split directly down the middle. 50% said yes and 50% said no. Thank you.
Interesting. So one thing I'd like to pause and talk a little bit about then, since we are split, is something that will really help your practice save time. And this is taking advantage of new software and strategies, using technology to meet your patient's digital needs. But now, what about enhancing automation at your practice? It could benefit you in a lot of different ways. It can improve cash flow. It updates a patient account quickly and accurately at the time the transaction occurs. So this is really talking about accepting payments in person, and then when you take that payment, having it automatically update the patient's ledger. It really does help to facilitate these payments in person and decrease the risk of bad debt by enabling you to collect them at the closest time of service rather than putting it off. And we certainly would love to see you take advantage of the efficiencies instead of having staff people manually entering transaction after transaction at the very end of the day. So gaining this efficiency at the office can save hours of time and will certainly help you reconcile and balance your day so that you can get out on time or avoid coming in at a time that the office is typically closed to do all these things. This is called digital, right? Digitalization. This is at its best. We're looking for improvements in efficiency in both cost and time. And comparing this to previous or outdated methods, you have this technology for you at your fingertips, and a lot of times it's in your practice management system. So talk a little bit more about that and what the benefits are of automating your payments. We talk a little bit about digitalization found at the point of payment, and it accelerates the office's getting paid for services rendered. There are steps you can take in order to ensure the office receives payment quickly and is convenient for your patients. So the first thing we say is offer all payment types. So this includes credit and debit cards, FSA, HSA, flex spending cards, and you can even still take checks. Remember, we talked about the baby boomers. They may still offer you a check, and that can even be electronically input so that you can still expedite those deposits. And another way practices get paid in full is to offer flexible or recurring payment plans to your patients. And I know those of you in orthodontia are used to setting up monthly plans, but I'm seeing this happen more and more in practices that People are looking for ways to pay off their balance. They want to pay. It's just that some of the balances are large, and if we offer them smaller recurring plans, it's a way to get the practice paid in full, just over a little bit more time. And as we discussed previously, many of your patients are comfortable paying online. You heard all those statistics. So you want to make sure your practice is set up to take online payments. And studies have shown that patients pay their bills faster when they have the opportunity to pay online, because they can go online during their lunch hour. They can go online and pay their bills in the evenings or on weekends, even when you could get paid even when your practice is closed. We know that we're all living digital lives. And when we embrace these changes to our environment and we meet our patients' expectations, we're going to boost productivity and improve the patient experience at the office. It boosts staff morale. And by implementing processes to improve efficiencies at the office, you'll be able to complete different tasks, other tasks that need your attention. And we know that change can be scary, and sometimes it sounds too good to be true. And most of the practices are used to doing things the way they've been doing them because they know that they work. But I'm hoping that in this presentation, you've had a few ideas that you can embrace these changes and you can put them into play so that you're either promoting your practice a little more on social media, or maybe you'll look into an option to automate patient payments and save yourself some time and manual effort. And what we know is across all the generations and throughout society, the focus of digitalization can be narrowed down to these three things. Connection, which is I use a singular hub now. I use a device. I use my phone to manage pretty much my entire life. My finances and my health are included in that. Communication. I want practices to talk to me in the way I prefer and the way I'm connected. And convenience. So empower me to make me as a patient to make informed decisions and access the data that I need to take care of myself and my health. And navigating the digital age is absolutely within each practice's reach. The speed of how fast things are going and changing is hard to predict, but it's not difficult to see that our world is going to function quite differently 10 or 15 years from now. So helping you to be prepared to navigate these transitions begins with the awareness of these shifts that are coming. And these steps are hopefully small enough to get you taking them towards digitalization and keeping your practice on course for the future. And at this time, that's the webinar, and we can open up the line for questions.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that excellent presentation. We'll now begin today's question and answer session. Please submit any questions you have by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled "Enter a question for staff" and clicking send. So one audience member wants to know, does your solution have recurring payments and a card on file capabilities?
That's a great question. Card on file is a really interesting way to offer a patient the ability to keep their credit card on file securely and use it in a future transaction. The example I usually use is, think about if you've ever made a hotel reservation. So you put your card in, it doesn't charge your card until you're ready to check out, because the hotel is going to see if there's any other future charges that they need to include. And the same process can be used at the office for post-adjudicated balances, or if a patient wants to call in and make a payment. You don't have to take that credit card information over the phone. You can charge the number in the system. And that is a benefit a lot of times within your practice management system. So I hope it's something that you'll be able to take advantage of. And yes, recurring payment plans work very similar to how I discussed, which is, when a patient is unable to pay their full balance for their treatment at time of service, you can offer them, if you're comfortable, a certain timeline to pay the balance in smaller chunks. And again, using that credit card that's stored is a great way to do that, so you're not relying on them to call in or make that payment every month. Perhaps you don't even need to send a statement. If you can do this automatically, it saves time and money. And we typically see practices who are using the automated payment posting option in their practice management system. They leverage both of these options.
Great. Thank you for that point, Michelle. So we have another question coming in, and this audience member wants to know, so of the multiple tools available to capture payments, what are you seeing most providers using?
Well, we see providers offering all of the payment types I mentioned: credit card, debit card, FSA, HSA, even still taking checks. But what we see the most rise is in the ability to take an online payment. So this can be via your portal, it could be via statement, and you have a website address in there. It's really strictly for convenience purposes, and it has been shown to get practices paid faster. People are not that afraid to put their credit card into the website, and they will pay their bills quicker because, like we mentioned, they're being able to do so on a time that's convenient for them. So that's one really big push and rise.
Great. Thank you for pointing that out. That's helpful to understand. So we've got another question, and this question is, can any patient use a patient portal, no matter if they're self-pay or using insurance?
I think that's a really interesting question. In terms of their access, I believe that would be set up by the practice. If you would extend the ability for your patients to pay via the portal, I think that it would have to either tell them how much of their balance it is, right? So say they have a $50 balance, the portal would want to tell them how much they're going to need to pay. So if it's insurance payment, are you going to be able to tell your patient how much is remaining? If you're only using that portal to make part of a payment, that would be an option as well. So I think those are things that you can set up as you're designing the portal or really interacting with the portal to say, can my patients pay any dollar amount, or am I going to show them their balance and they have to pay a specific amount? Hope that helps.
Thanks, Michelle. Great. Yeah, that's super helpful. So that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank Michelle Dowling for her insights today and to our audience for participating. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to having you join us for future webinars.